If the first motion attacked how this case was brought, the second one attacks why. Comey's lawyers say the indictment wasn't just unlawful, it was personal. They call it political payback ordered by the president to punish a critic. I'm Bill Hauser. If you've already watched our earlier breakdown of the first motion, the one that challenged the U.S. Attorney's appointment, this is the follow-up. It focuses on the motive behind the case. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'll link it here and below. The second motion takes aim at motive, and it's just as explosive. Comey's defense calls the prosecution retaliation, ordered personally by the president to punish a critic. The filing recounts years of public attacks on Comey by the president. Social media posts calling him a slimeball, a corrupt piece of garbage, and demanding that he be prosecuted. The motion claims that when career prosecutors refused to charge Comey, the president forced them out, replaced them with loyalists, and installed Lindsay Halligan, his former personal lawyer, to get it done before the statute of limitations ran out. That, they argue, violates the free speech protections of the First Amendment and 2 fundamental constitutional guarantees. Due process, because using criminal law for revenge is the textbook definition of vindictive prosecution, and equal protection, because choosing who to prosecute based on political loyalty is selective prosecution. The defense doesn't rely only on inference. They quote a message the president posted on his own social media site just days before Halligan's appointment. Pam, we can't delay any longer. Justice must be served now. Within 48 hours, Halligan was appointed, and 4 days later the indictment followed. The motion also highlights unequal treatment. It lists 4 Trump officials, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, Tom Price, and Steve Mnuchin, who allegedly gave false or misleading statements to Congress but were never charged. The only real difference, they say, is that those officials remained loyal to the president. But here's the reality. Vindictive and selective prosecution motions are extraordinarily difficult to win. Courts start with what's called the presumption of regularity, the assumption that prosecutors act lawfully and that indictments are brought in good faith. To overcome that presumption, a defendant has to present clear evidence that others similarly situated were not charged, and that the prosecution was driven by bad faith. That's a very high bar, and most of these motions fail. Still, the court will take this motion seriously, and it could open a door that DOJ will want to keep closed. If the judge allows the motion to go forward, the next step could be discovery, an order requiring the government to turn over internal communications and documents showing how this case was initiated, and the judge could also order a public hearing. That could be extremely embarrassing for President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, and the Department of Justice, because if internal communications in the Department of Justice show that this prosecution began with political pressure from the White House, it would appear to confirm what the defense calls an abuse of power. The defense also knows that this motion may never be decided at all. If the court grants the first motion, the one challenging Halligan's appointment, or the literal truth motion, a separate filing expected later this month arguing that Comey's statements weren't false when read in full context, the judge may never reach the constitutional questions raised here. Under a Supreme Court principle known as the constitutional avoidance doctrine, federal judges are guided to avoid constitutional rulings when a case can be resolved on narrower, non-constitutional grounds. So if the indictment falls on the appointments issue or the literal truth defense, this second motion could simply become moot. Still, the motion serves an important purpose. It puts motive in the integrity of DOJ's decision-making on trial. The defense's bottom line is simple. If this case began as political payback, it can't end in a fair conviction. However the court rules, this motion also forces DOJ and the country to confront a question bigger than one defendant. How much damage is done to our justice system when the power to prosecute starts to look like the power to punish dissent? I'll keep tracking this case as it moves forward. If you want clear, fact-based analysis of what happens next, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next update. Remember, where law rules, justice follows.